stars are right, and that means it's time for another episode of The Whisper in Darkness. I'm your host, the Man from Lang. Thank you very much for joining me today. On this episode, I am continuing my review of the player cards in Black Stars Rise, the 5th Mythos pack in the Path to Carcosa cycle. This time I am looking at the Survivor and Neutral player cards. There are, of course, only Survivor cards. There were no Neutral cards in this pack. There are the survivors receive a skill and a card that interacts with skills in this pack. So let's take a look at those cards now. The first survivor card in the pack is Not Without a Fight. It's a skill with willpower, combat, and agility skill icons, and the innate trait, which will be important when we look at the next card in this pack. It has the game text, commit to a skill test only if you are engaged with an enemy. For each enemy engaged with you, not without a fight, gains a willpower, combat, and agility skill icon. Now, the Survivor was the only class that didn't receive a class skill card in the Pallid Mask, but the designers have made up for it in Black Stars Rise with Not Without a Fight. Now, this card appears to show Rita Young, Arkham Horror's resident athlete, in a pitched battle with some sort of slimy, tentacled denizen of the mythos. Now, I'm not sure why she's armed with a wrench rather than, say, a tennis racket, but I guess desperate times call for desperate measures. Perhaps she was doing some light plumbing at your house when the enemy attacked. This art makes me wonder whether Rita will in fact be a survivor if and when she makes her Arkham Horror debut at some point down the road. Let's start off by talking about this card's opportunity cost. You cannot play Not Without a Fight unless you are engaged with an enemy. I'm not a big fan of cards with these types of restrictions because there's no guarantee that you'll be able to play it when you need it the most. Remember Rise to the Occasion? Those three wild icons look very juicy on paper, but that card turned out to be very tricky to commit to skill tests, and it doesn't make the cut in my Survivor decks just because I really have a hard time finding the right time to play it. So if you've got Not Without a Fight in your deck, what are you going to do if one of your fellow investigators needs to pass that do or die willpower or agility skill test? And this card is your only source of willpower or agility skill icons. Unless you're engaged with an enemy, you won't be able to commit it to a skill test, and I really hate the idea of getting screwed that way. Now, I'm not saying don't play Not Without a Fight, but I think the opportunity cost is something that you should keep in mind before you cut all your copies of Guts, Overpower, and Manual Dexterity from your deck for this. They're not quite the same, and I think a card like Not Without a Fight actually works better as a supplement to some of those neutral skill cards from the core set rather than a straight up replacement. If you're engaged with more than one enemy, Not Without a Fight looks decent, albeit it's a little bit bland. The card has 2 willpower, combat, and agility icons while you're engaged with one enemy, and that icon count will just keep climbing for each additional enemy engaged with you. That said, I'm willing to bet that 99% of the time you're committing this card to a skill test for 2 skill icons, which isn't all that exciting. Not Without a Fight is certainly a lot more versatile than the core set skills, in that you can commit it for either willpower, combat, or agility icons. But in terms of raw power, it's going to be pretty much the same most of the time. Not Without a Fight does have one big advantage over the core set skills, and that is worth noting, and that is that you can bring it back from your discard pile with cards like Resourceful, William York's Elder Sign Effect, and the next card in this pack, True Survivor. Now, odds are you're going to commit Not Without a Fight to a skill test for only 2 icons, But if you have the potential to do that 3 or 4 times per scenario, the card certainly starts to look a lot better. There are quite a few investigators who can use Not Without a Fight, including Agnes Baker and Wendy Adams from the core set. Of course, all of the investigators from the Dunwich Legacy, and Min Tae Fan, William York, and Lola Hayes from the Path to Carcosa. Not Without a Fight is a skill, so Min can give it that little extra boost with her response. Committing Not Without a Fight during a fight or evade action for +3 combat or agility sounds pretty good to me in that deck. I also like the looks of Not Without a Fight in a William York deck. York can trigger his response only if he defeats an enemy, so odds are pretty good that he's going to be engaged with an enemy more often than not. York's ability to recycle cards such as Leathercoat and Cherished Keepsake from the discard pile means he's quite capable of tanking more than one enemy at a time if necessary. And of course, more enemies means more icons for Not Without a Fight. And to top it off, York can return Not Without a Fight to his hand with his Elder Sign effect, which gives him the potential to commit a single copy of Not Without a Fight multiple times per game. And that's pretty good. Now, I can see a couple of situations where this card stock would rise significantly. First, there's currently no connection between the number of enemies engaged with you and the difficulty of the skill test. However, I could see the designers exploring this sort of design space, perhaps creating an enemy with a fight or evade value of X, where X is the number of enemies engaged with you. Not Without a Fight would certainly be great in that type of situation, because it would scale with the number of enemies, and you could use it on that fight or evade check. I could also see the designers exploring some sort of double test mechanic that would force an investigator to test 2 skills at the same time, say a combat and agility, or willpower or combat skill test to achieve a certain goal. Now, I'm not exactly sure how you would resolve this multiple skill test, whether you'd have to pull just one token from the Chaos Bag or multiple tokens, but Not Without a Fight would certainly be great in this type of situation, since you could commit it, if you were engaged with an enemy, of course, you could commit it for 2 of each skill icon, and that would be quite powerful. I've heard some mixed reviews from players about Not Without a Fight since it was released, so I'm a little hesitant to jump on board with this card. As I mentioned earlier, I'm not a big fan of skill cards that come with restrictions on when you can play them. However, I think I'm willing to give to cut Not Without a Fight some slack due to its flexibility and the fact that there are many ways to bring it back from your discard pile. In the right deck that's able to remain engaged with enemies consistently, I could certainly see Not Without a Fight doing some serious work. Now, like I mentioned at the beginning of my Guardian review, I do have some vacation time coming up, and I'm planning to spend some of that vacation time brushing up on my Survivor investigators. And building a William York deck is definitely on my to-do list. So I'm going to put this card, try to put this card through its paces. The second Survivor card in the pack is True Survivor. It's a 3-cost event that costs 3 experience points. It has the spirit trait and the game text, return 3 innate skills from your discard pile to your hand. Let's start off by taking a look at which investigators can purchase True Survivor, which is it's among the most expensive cards for the class. Of course, survivors, all of their upgrades seem to be capped at 3 experience points, so this is on the upper end. You've got Wendy Adams, Ashcan Pete, and William York being the obvious contenders. Lola Hayes can also purchase True Survivor, which could open up some interesting possibilities. Now, there is a 5th investigator, and that is Silas Marsh, who will be released in the upcoming Deep Gate novella. Silas is noteworthy because of his game text is all about skills. Now, we don't know Silas's deck building restrictions yet, but I think the odds are good that skills will figure prominently, which would make True Survivor a natural fit in his deck. Silas isn't going to be released for a couple months yet, so we'll have to wait and see whether skills he is able to take skills from a variety of classes, and if they are innate skills, then True Survivor could certainly find a home in his deck. Now, True Survivor's effect is pretty straightforward. You pay your 3 resources and bring 3 innate skills from your discard pile back to your hand. Now, 3 resources it's a little higher on the cost curve than some investigators would like, particularly those that are rocking Dark Horse builds. True Survivor's cost, I think, is likely to keep it out of a few decks. However, it is the first card that interacts with the innate trait, so True Survivor's power ultimately depends on the power of the skills that you can target with it. Speaking of the innate skills, there are currently 18 innate skills in the game, and 6 of those are found in the core set, those being Fearless, Guts, Manual Dexterity, Opportunist, Survival Instinct, and Unexpected Courage. As far as survivors are concerned, the 3 neutral skills are probably the most enticing, although I know that Survival Instinct and its level 2 upgrade from Undimensioned and Unseen do have their admirers in the community. The other innate skills in the Survivor class are Resourceful, Not Without a Fight, Stroke of Luck, and Rise to the Occasion. Now, Resourceful I think is easily the best of the bunch because you can grab any other Survivor card besides Resourceful from your discard pile and add it to your hand. You could even use Resourceful to grab True Survivor, which you could use to return the Resourceful and 2 other skills to your hand. If you've got plenty of resources, you can just rinse and repeat, so you could actually end up playing True Survivor multiple times per game. I like Stroke of Luck quite a bit, but it doesn't make the cut in Survivor decks nearly as often as Resourceful does, probably due to the fact that it's an exile card that costs 2 experience points. You could certainly try to fetch it back with True Survivor as long as you haven't exiled it, and I think most of the time, if you really need a card like Stroke of Luck, you are playing it for the exile ability. So you're not necessarily going to have a chance to grab it back with True Survivor. I had high hopes for Rise to the Occasion when it came out in Blood on the Altar, but I could never get it to work for me particularly well. I've really come to hate that restriction on it when you can commit it to a test, which is probably the reason I'm so suspicious of Not Without a Fight. I think time will tell whether Not Without a Fight is going to become a staple of Survivor decks, or become as popular as Resourceful has been. I think Resourceful has really made an impact since it was released in the Path to Carcosa big box. There are a couple of other innate skills that I'd keep my eye on. Wendy or Ashcan Pete can take Quick Thinking, the rogue skill from Undimensioned and Unseen that lets you immediately take an action as though it was your turn if you succeed by 2 or more. Generating extra actions is always good. That action advantage can really go a long way in scenarios. So if you were able to recycle Quick Thinking with True Survivor a couple of times per game to generate those extra actions, that seems like a pretty solid plan. Ashcan Pete or William York may be interested in Inspiring Presence, the Guardian skill from the Pallid Mask that lets you ready and heal an exhausted ally. Duke could certainly become a True Survivor if you play Inspiring Presence several times per game to ready him and heal him should he take some damage. I think Inquiring Mind and Eureka, which are Seeker skills from Undimensioned and Unseen and the Pallid Mask respectively, are also interesting choices. Inquiring Mind has those juicy 3 wild icons which you can commit as long as there's a clue at your location. And Eureka is that tutor which might find a home in combo decks that are trying to search for possibly search for innate skills to grab them, or search for that innate survivor to get all those skills back. So there's certainly some potential with those two cards as well. True Survivor isn't the flashiest card by any stretch of the imagination, but it is the first one that synergizes with the innate trait, and I think that alone makes it extremely interesting. There are quite a few solid innate skills, including Resourceful Guts and Unexpected Courage. If those cards are pivotal to your strategy, it's probably worth picking up a copy or two of True Survivor to get even more value out of them. I've already seen at least one deck on Arkham DB that is trying to leverage those innate skills in conjunction with True Survivor, and I expect to see more decks posted as players have a chance to experiment with the card. That's going to do it for my look at the Survivor cards in Black Stars Rise. I have to admit that I haven't been playing Survivors of late, so it's difficult for me to really judge whether or not Without a Fight and True Survivor will find a home in the current decks, or potentially spawn new ones. I'm a little wary of Not Without a Fight due to its opportunity cost, but it could probably find a home in a William Yorick deck. Yorick is rewarded for defeating enemies, so having a couple extra combat icons is always nice. I also like the fact that you could play Not Without a Fight for those agility icons if you need to run rather than fight. I've been playing a lot of Roland Banks lately, and I've found myself pining for a few more agility icons in the deck. They're just, Roland is great at taking down enemies, but there are some occasions where you do need to run, and not having those agility icons isn't great. William Yorick's agility is slightly better than Roland's, so if you needed to commit the Not Without a Fight for its agility icons rather than its combat icons, I think it could come in quite handy. True Survivor is an interesting card, but I'm not sure whether there's a home for it yet. There are a lot of Dark Horse builds floating around right now, and playing a 3-cost event doesn't really mesh with that strategy particularly well. There are a lot of interesting innate skills though, so I'm looking forward to experimenting with True Survivor to see whether bringing those skills back from the discard pile is worth the effort. The elephant in the room, of course, is Silas Marsh, and I wouldn't be surprised if True Survivor found a home in his deck, but we won't know that for sure until we see his deck building restrictions. Who knows, maybe he'll be able to take level 0 innate skills as part of his deck from any class, in which case True Survivor's stock goes up considerably. Overall, I think this is a fantastic pack. There are so many interesting cards in it. I think the designers really hit it out of the park with this pack, and lots of powerful cards. Lots of cards that are gonna create new decks in Guardian and Mystic in particular. And I'm looking forward to seeing what they have in store for us in Dim Carcosa. We've already seen some of the cards spoiled. There are some extremely powerful cards in that pack, and I know the one that was spoiled by the Drawn to the Flame podcast has certainly generated a lot of interest, and I'm looking forward to reviewing that for you when I get back from my vacation. That's going to do it for me today. If you enjoyed this review, I'd appreciate it if you could leave me a thumbs up. Make sure you hit that subscribe button to be notified of when I release future content. If you've had a chance to play with any of these cards, please let me know in the comments down below. Let me know how they worked out for you. I always enjoy chatting with you guys. If you need to contact me, I can be reached at manfromleng@gmail.com. I'm also on Twitter at manfromleng. Until the stars are right, keep your shotgun close and your elder sign closer. Take care out there, and happy investigating.